He raised his gun, but froze at the sound of the girl kneeling on the ground. Please, don't shoot. My mom. She's dying. And in that moment, he found himself staring into the eyes of the woman who had vanished years ago. Nothing would ever be the same again. By the way, we noticed something small. Most people who watch these stories aren't actually subscribed to the channel. Maybe we get caught up in the moment or just forget to hit the button. But your support truly helps us keep creating stories like this. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Winter was even quieter this morning. It wasn't the wind moving through the air, it felt like time itself. Elias Weber stood alone on his porch, hands in his pockets. His breath vanished like invisible smoke, mixing with the frozen fields beyond the yard. He hadn't said a single word in the past 20 days. He hadn't felt the need to. He took care of everything in silence, fed the animals, broke the ice for water, stacked the firewood all by himself. Anyone watching him from outside wouldn't think he was living. They'd think he was just drifting like a shadow. But that morning, there was a figure moving along the snow-covered road. The footsteps were uneven. The left leg seemed to be limping, and the steps left dragging marks in the snow. Elias grabbed his rifle. It was just habit. Around here, anything that comes close is either hungry, a fraud, or both. He watched silently, squinting his eyes. The figure got closer. At first, Elias thought it was a trick. But then, when the person dropped to their knees in the snow and lifted their face, he felt a chill inside. It was a child. She wore only a thin dress. Her hands were bare. Her pale lips trembled as she spoke. Please, don't shoot. My mom's dying, she said. Her eyes weren't full of tears, they were full of cold. Elias's finger was on the trigger, but his heart skipped in a way he didn't expect. The girl's face, it looked too familiar. How far? Elias asked. He noticed his voice cracked. It had been so long since he'd spoken. Even his voice felt as fragile as snow. About 2 miles as the crow flies, longer on foot, the girl said. I walked all night. She tried to stay on her feet, but stumbled. Elias rushed to catch her. This time, he'd left the rifle behind. Her skin was ice cold. She wasn't even wearing shoes. The corners of her lips were cracked. But her eyes were still strong. This wasn't a child who lied to survive. This was someone who walked, begged, and fought through ice to stay alive. While Elias saddled his horse, the girl waited quietly. He wrapped a blanket around the saddle, then carefully lifted her up. Hold on tight, he said. She nodded, but didn't hold very tight. She was clearly ashamed, or maybe her pride hurt more than her wounds. They didn't talk on the way. Snow hung heavy on the branches, and it felt like the trees were listening. The sky was gray. Time itself seemed frozen. Elias held the reins tight, but his mind wandered. Those eyes, that face, a mark on the chin. There was a shadow of the past haunting him like a ghost. This child, she reminded him of someone he once knew. There, the girl said, pointing a trembling hand to a slope in the west. There was a nearly collapsed shack near a frozen creek. Smoke came out of the chimney, but even the smoke seemed to rise with effort. Elias stopped the horse and helped the girl down. She wobbled, but didn't fall. She walked toward the shack. The door was half open. Inside, the air was both warm and filled with the smell of death. When Elias stepped in, he saw a woman lying on straw on the floor. Thin, pale, her bones showing. She opened her eyes with difficulty. And then, Elias felt his heart stop. Her name was Sophia. She had disappeared one morning, 8 years ago. No note, no sign. Elias had searched for her for years and tried to forget her with anger. But here she was again, in this dark shack. Half her body looked like it had died from the cold, but her eyes, those were still her eyes. Elias, she whispered. Her lips cracked as she said his name. Elias knelt down. He had found the woman he once loved again. But what he found wasn't a woman anymore, it was wreckage. The girl, she said her name was Nora, stood in a corner. I found her in an old church, she said. She was coughing blood. I pulled her out. We've been walking ever since. Elias turned his head. His eyes looked shaken. You took care of her, he asked. Nora nodded. She has no one but me. And I'm not leaving her. Elias moved fast. He heated water in the kettle, made some broth in a tin can. He gently touched it to the woman's lips. He found a quilt, brought blankets, stoked the fire. He brought life back into the shack. But in that place behind those cold walls, it wasn't just the fire that started to burn again. The past was burning too. When night fell, the wind changed direction. The cracked walls of the shack started to creak. Elias woke up every 2 hours to keep the fire alive, throwing on more wood and touching the woman's lips with the water he warmed in a tin cup. Sophia, drifting in and out of sleep, sometimes whispered his name, sometimes the names of cities he'd never heard of, women he'd never known. Each one was a splinter from a life long gone. Elias sat in a corner, watching her breathe. He couldn't believe there was still life in a body so frail, so lost. Before the morning darkness even faded, Elias turned his face from the window and looked at Nora. The girl was crouched on a stool by her mother's side, as if standing guard. Her eyelids were heavy, but her eyes were wide open. It was like she'd never learned how to sleep at night. "Did you sleep at all?" Elias asked softly. Nora shook her head. "When I close my eyes, I see bad things." Elias didn't respond, because he felt the same. Every time he shut his eyes, he saw that morning Sophia smiled on the porch, or the evening she came back with a basket of apples. And then, the day she never came at all. But now she was here, just as someone else. An hour later, Elias helped them onto his horse. He gently placed Sophia's frail body on the saddle, and Nora climbed up behind her. There was nothing to leave behind at the shack, no food, no belongings. Just memories buried under snow. It didn't feel like leaving a home. It felt like walking away from a silence that had already been buried. They didn't speak on the way, only the sound of hooves and the whistle of cold cutting through bone. By the time they reached Elias's farm, the sun was a pale circle behind the clouds. Standing on the threshold, Elias realized this wasn't just his home anymore. When those broken people stepped quietly inside, it felt like even the walls let out a sigh. He carried Sophia to bed, lit the lamps, started boiling soup. Nora, exhausted but without complaint, chopped onions. She held the knife wrong, hit the blade a few times, but never said a word. As night settled again, Elias sat at the edge of the bed. Sophia stirred under the blanket. "Is Nora yours?" she asked in a low voice, her breath drifting like smoke into the air. Her eyes were turned to the dark, but her ears were searching for Elias's silence. "Yes," Elias said, then paused. "But I didn't know." Sophia slowly turned her head toward him. There was no regret in her eyes, no apology, just an endless exhaustion and words caught in her throat. "I didn't know either," she said. "Not until it was too late." At that moment, the door creaked open. Nora stepped in barefoot, wrapped in a blanket. She looked at Elias, then at Sophia. "If tomorrow my mom doesn't wake up," she said hesitantly, "can I still stay here?" Elias didn't answer. He stood up and knelt in front of her. "My name's Elias," he said with a soft smile. "I build fences in the yard. I burn beans in the barn. If you want, I can teach you how to make a fire, how to hammer a nail without punching it." Nora lowered her head a little. Her lips twitched just slightly, and for the first time, something truly childlike appeared in her eyes. A sense of belonging. Elias returned to his room. Sophia was still awake. He held her hand. It was bony, cold, but still real. She said, "I'm still cold." Elias adjusted the blanket. "I'll stoke the fire." Sophia shook her head. "No, I'm cold inside." Elias paused for a moment. It wasn't fire she needed, it was time to warm her. When silence settled in, under the flickering lamplight, Elias leaned back in his chair. He looked at Sophia's face. The woman he once loved, the woman he couldn't even manage to hate afterward. Everything had been left unfinished in the past. But now, maybe a few pieces could still come together. As Elias walked to the fence that morning, it felt like he was stepping on the bones of the past with every step. The air was still sharp and heavy, but the sky had turned a light gray, and the wind had shifted. Nora scattered feed for the chickens in the coop without saying a word. But her silence no longer came from loneliness, it came from carefully maintaining a new kind of balance. She wasn't just a guest anymore. Maybe she wasn't quite the daughter of the house yet, but she had become one of those who turned their head at the creak of the door. Inside, Sophia was trying to stand up. When Elias got to her, her forehead was sweaty and her hands were trembling. "I have to get up today," Sophia said. "I know people have seen me. They won't stay quiet." "Who?" Elias asked, but Sophia didn't answer. Her eyes drifted toward the window. Elias, with the cold composure he'd carried for years, understood immediately. Out here, silence was the key to survival, but it never lasted forever. And apparently, someone had already broken it. That afternoon, Elias saddled his horse. He wrapped Sophia in an old blanket and brought Nora along. He was taking them to town. They needed a doctor, medicine, some food, and more. They had to be seen before the rumors spread because in this place, not being seen often drew more attention. As they set out, the snow was light, but the sky was uncertain. Elias held the reins tight. Nora sat beside him, arms around her mother's waist, eyes on the road. She was quiet, but alert. The whole town was waiting for a reason to break its silence. They both knew it. The town looked like a memory caught between presence and absence. Old men stood silently outside the shops. Women peeked through half-open curtains. Elias's arrival alone would have drawn attention. Now he came with a woman and a child. And if that woman was the once missing Sophia, it was an earthquake in this town's rotten sense of morality. Their first stop was the pharmacy. When Nora jumped down, her eyes scanned the faces of the people passing by. Some stared with curiosity, others with a silent kind of judgment. Elias carried Sophia with a stride that held both anger and resolve. The bell above the door rang sharply as they entered. Behind the counter stood a man, someone who had once owed Elias money, but now acted like the town's self-appointed judge. He looked up. When he saw Sophia, his face dropped. "It's been a long time," he said with a sarcastic smirk. "Didn't think you'd survive." Elias spoke without lowering his head. "You got medicine? If not, don't waste my time." The man's eyes shifted to Nora. "Whose kid is that?" "I wasn't talking to you," Elias said. His tone wasn't harsh, but it drew a clear line. He placed some coins quietly on the counter. "Medicine. Now." The shop went quiet. Reluctantly, the man handed over a bottle and a few small paper packets. Elias took them without a thank you. As they walked out, Nora didn't even glance back. But something had changed outside. In front of the post where Elias had tied his horse, a man was waiting. Leather jacket, wide hat, gun out in plain view. His hands rested on his belt, but his eyes were locked on Sophia. "So you brought her back," the man said, not to Elias, but straight to her. "I'm surprised." Sophia struggled to breathe. Her face went pale. "Lucas," she whispered. Elias took a step toward the man. "I don't know who you are, but this woman is under protection in this town. And if you're still the type to talk from the shadows, you'll have to deal with me first." Lucas laughed. A cold, high laugh. "That woman didn't just leave you hanging, Elias. She left others too. But now she's back. And some things don't stay unfinished." At that moment, Elias realized. This wasn't just some old love story. It was the crossroads of all the unfinished debts. Sophia wasn't just his ghost, she was someone others had tried to bury too. Lucas didn't threaten or say another word. He just turned and disappeared around the corner. But the sound of his footsteps kept echoing in Elias's ears. Elias returned to the cart. Sophia's lips were pale, but her eyes were wide open. "They won't let us go," she said. Elias grabbed the reins. "Let them try. We're not running anymore." The return to town was quiet, but this time the silence didn't come from peace, it came from an approaching storm. As Elias drove the wagon along the road, Sophia kept glancing back. It was like she expected someone to suddenly appear, stand in the middle of the road, and pull them right back into the past. Nora had her head resting on her mother's shoulder, eyes half closed, but she was awake. She was always awake. When they reached Elias's home, the day hadn't darkened yet. The sky was leaden, and there was a sharp tension in the air above the soil. As soon as the wagon stopped, Nora jumped down, opened the door, and rushed inside to prepare the blankets. Sophia was very weak. Elias carried her, but this time, she felt heavier. Not her body, what weighed him down were the memories he carried with her. As he laid her on the pillow, she didn't take her eyes off Elias. "There are things I've kept hidden," she said, her voice thin as a curtain. "But you need to trust me." Elias slowly nodded. "I need to know the past to trust you." Sophia paused for a moment, then whispered softly, "There was a past with Lucas. But the only thing that's real is that Nora is yours." The words hung in the air. Elias bowed his head. He'd already faced this truth before, but hearing it from her mouth was something else. At that moment, the door handle turned. It wasn't Nora, and it wasn't a guest. Elias stood quickly and picked up his rifle, but his finger didn't go to the trigger. When he opened the door, the man standing there wasn't a stranger like he expected. It was an old acquaintance. His name was Conrad. Once the town's fence builder, now one of the more listened-to men around. His eyes were direct. "We heard about you," he said. That the woman came back. Elias kept his head high. She did. And with a child, Conrad added. And now we know who she is. Yes, Elias said. Conrad stepped back. There's going to be a town meeting. Tomorrow. The sheriff, Lucas, and the others will be there. They'll want to see you too. Elias didn't lower his gaze. I want to see them. It's time to speak plainly. Conrad looked away. People don't like change, Elias. I know, Elias said. But this time, let's not be the ones who change. Let them adjust. When the door closed, Nora had silently stepped out from inside. She had heard everything. You're going to that meeting? She asked. We are, Elias said. We'll go together. For the first time, Nora stepped back. They won't want me. Elias crouched to her eye level. It doesn't matter if they want you. What matters is if you can carry yourself. And I know you can. Nora thought for a second, then nodded. Okay, we'll go. But we have to protect my mom. Elias looked straight at her, unwavering. I'll protect all of us. As night fell, the house began to prepare. Elias gave Nora an old vest. He showed her how to stand strong, make eye contact, and not step back in the face of a threat. Sophia wrote a letter. She didn't give it to Elias. She didn't show it to anyone. But from the trembling in her hands, the letter smelled of goodbye. By dawn, when the sky turned light blue, Elias saddled the horse. He placed Sophia in the wagon. Nora sat beside her, holding an old prayer book. It wasn't a ritual, it was a reminder. A way not to forget who she was. As they approached the town, voices rose from the church building. The meeting had started, and they weren't just there to listen. This time, they had a story to tell. And this time, no one would stay silent. The town square was more crowded than ever that morning. But the crowd was quiet like before a trial. People had gathered in front of the church building, hands in their pockets, avoiding each other's eyes. No one was speaking, but every face said something. Curiosity, anger, worry, and some fear. When Elias stopped the wagon in front of the church, every head turned. Nora held her mother's hand tightly. Sophia held her head high, but her face was pale. Elias opened the door. Nora got down first. Then Elias carefully carried Sophia. It felt like the whole town was holding its breath. The floorboards creaked as they walked into the church. All conversation stopped immediately. The sheriff was sitting. Lucas was standing, looking out the window. Behind them stood the town's important men, merchants, old friends, and men who were once allies, but now, no one knew whose side they were really on. Elias kept walking. He placed Sophia's cane, letting her take a step forward. Nora walked between them, small, but steady. The sheriff stood. Elias, he said, we wanted to see you. There are things you need to explain. Elias didn't stop. When he reached the center of the church, he began to speak. I haven't come to give you an explanation. I've brought you the truth, he said. This woman Sophia disappeared from here 8 years ago. But no one asked why. No one tried to find out where she went. You forgot her. But she fought to survive. And she came back. Lucas stepped forward. She came back because she left someone behind, he said. But not everyone forgets being abandoned, Elias. Sophia stepped up. Her face was pale, but her voice was clear. I didn't leave. I was taken. I got sick with fever on a trip. I couldn't speak or move. They didn't leave me on the road, but they didn't let me come back either. Later, the caravans changed. People died. Life tried to erase anyone who remembered my name. But I came back. Silence filled the hall. And my daughter, Sophia said, my daughter is Elias's. The sheriff turned his eyes to Elias. What about papers? A wedding? Witnesses? Elias answered without blinking. You don't look for proof on paper, you look in the heart. I consider this child as my own blood, and I'll never leave her alone. A murmur rose. People whispered to each other. A woman standing in the church corner, someone who had never spoken before, just watched it up. I remember Sophia, she said. I saw her helping someone once. While everyone else walked by, she stopped. She was always quiet, always apart from the crowd, but never a bad person. A man the town baker nodded. We don't know what she's been through all these years. But if she came back, it means she still cares about something. The sheriff's voice had softened. And you, Elias, will you still stand by her, even with all these people watching? I don't want to stand by her despite these people, Elias said. I want to build a life with them. But if I have to, I'll build it alone. Because we're not running anymore. Because my daughter deserves better. All eyes turned to Nora. She held her head high. She gripped the old prayer book tightly. I wasn't born here, but I want to grow up here. Lucas stepped forward. People don't forgive these things so easily. Sophia looked straight into his eyes. You don't want to forgive because you don't want to leave your darkness behind. The sheriff held out his hand to stop Lucas. That's enough. This isn't personal anymore. It's about the community. But don't forget this. If we want to live together, we have to accept the pain together too. The church went quiet again. No boos, no applause. But something had changed in the eyes around them. The looks were less sharp, the postures less closed off. As they stepped outside, Elias pulled Sophia and Nora in close. The sun was out. The snow was slowly melting. The first steps of spring had begun to echo. At that moment, someone touched Elias's arm. It was Irene, the old midwife of the town. I remember you, she said. Sophia, I thought you were long gone. But now I understand, some women don't die. They just get buried, and then they're born again. Elias was about to thank her, but Irene turned to Nora instead. I brought you a pair of boots, she said. If you want to stand strong in this land, you've got to start with your feet. Nora nodded with a small smile. Thank you. Elias glanced at Sophia. She wasn't crying, but the fear in her eyes was gone. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. Elias had woken up early that morning. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the air was covered in leftover fog from the night. The farm was quiet. The chickens were still motionless inside the coop, the horses still asleep. But inside the house was alive now. There was no more silence. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was filled with the rhythm of peaceful breathing echoing off the walls. Sophia woke to the sound of boiling water on the stove. Elias watched her out of the corner of his eye as he made tea. Sophia walked to the kitchen with slow but steady steps. She wasn't using a cane this time. Her knees ached, but she wanted to stand tall. Nora was by her side. She watched her mother closely with each step, ready to catch her if needed. But Sophia didn't fall. She stayed on her feet. That morning's breakfast was simple but warm. Fried potatoes, some canned tomatoes, and beans that Elias had slightly overcooked. Nora ate everything. The girl who once took small, cautious bites was now someone who truly sat at the table. After they finished, Elias stepped onto the porch. He held an old wooden chest. He placed it in the middle of the porch and opened the lid. Inside were memories untouched for years. An old knitted blanket from his mother, a rusty pocket knife once carried by his father, and a small pendant carved from bone. It had a sun symbol etched into it. Nora stepped closer, curious. What's that? She asked. I didn't even do this when you were born, Elias said. But years ago, I made it in case I ever became a father. Then everything fell apart. Hope was buried, along with this chest. But now it's time. He placed the pendant around Nora's neck. She lowered her head, fingers wrapping around the small charm. I've never had anything that was really mine, she said. Now I do. Sophia watched from a distance. When Elias turned his eyes toward her, she paused. It was like she had been waiting for this moment too. Then she pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Elias. I wrote it but never got to send it, she said. Elias opened the letter. There was a short sentence inside. If these words ever reach you, know that I still remember your name. And I gave our daughter her name with that light in mind. At the bottom, Bonnie Elara Sophia Weber. Elias couldn't speak for a moment. He held the paper in his hands, then turned to Nora. Is that your full name? He asked. Nora, now Bonnie, nodded. But everyone's always called me Bonnie. Mom only said the Elara part to herself. Sophia took another step. Bonnie means one who comes from the light. She was born in the dark, but always brave enough to walk toward the road. At that moment, the sound of hooves echoed outside. Elias didn't reach for his rifle. He didn't need to. When he stepped out the door, he saw that it was Irene. She wasn't alone. A few women stood behind her. One held fabric, another carried a basket of bread. And behind them was the sheriff. But this time, his gun wasn't on his chest. His head was bowed. We brought something for you, Irene said. It's not traditional, maybe, but some things are smothered by tradition anyway. The women handed packages to Sophia. A pair of new socks, fresh bread, some dried meat, and a book. The town owes you, one of them said. But this isn't something you should have to ask for. It's something we should have given on our own. The sheriff raised his head. We watched you. We judged you, like everyone else. But like everyone else, we were wrong. And I guess sometimes, surviving isn't enough. Some people also show us how to be human again. This time Sophia didn't hold back her tears. Bonnie stepped in, holding her mother's hand. We don't have to forgive everything, she said. But we don't have to hide anymore either. That night, for the first time, the stove inside the house warmed more than just the rooms. It warmed them inside too. Elias opened an old journal. He picked up a pen and began to write. Sophia sat in the armchair by the window, hands tucked into a blanket. Bonnie sat in front of the stove, her necklace catching the light, wrapping the new scarf her mother had made around her neck. Outside, snow had started falling again. But this time, no one felt cold. Elias sat beside the stove and spoke quietly. This house isn't quiet anymore. Because now, we're all here. And in that moment, the doors of the past didn't close. They simply clicked into place. Because some stories aren't forgotten. Some people can't be erased. And some children, they don't just survive. They keep others alive too. Knowing where you came from is knowing where you're going, Elias's father once said. And now Elias, Sophia, and Bonnie, all three finally knew where they were headed. We're just a few steps away from reaching our first 1,500 subscribers, our growing family. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you to everyone who's brought us this far. With your support, we grow stronger with every story. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time.